I think I'm live. Yes, I'm live. Okay, I did it right. Um, Hello, everybody. It's Saturday. I have lots of announcements and things to talk about. Let me get my comment section up real quick. Okay. Good afternoon. Happy Saturday. Lots of exciting things happening. Um, no. So, as you may or may not know, May is Mental Health Month, and that starts Monday. So I'm have several guests lined up. I am trying to find as many guests as possible to talk about mental health. Um, Next month, I want to do a topic a day for 31 days on mental health, so different mental health topics. Monday, we're going to have Kim, who is ADHD and neurodivergent, and we're going to talk about trauma and neurodivergence. And I have several other guests this week and some weeks after that. So I'm lining up all kind of good topics and guests for us for Mental Health Month. Um, the other thing is, of course, y'all know I'm excited about it. 80s dance party tonight. I can't wait. I woke up, popped out of bed, excited for it, ready to dance. So that's going to be at 7 p.m. Central. Ooh, let me move this. If you want the link for that, just message me and I will get you in the door. Uh, Other things, in addition to Mental Health Month, I finally am ready to launch the practice that I've been building for myself. It's going to be called Satyrs Grove Consulting, and I have the website ready to go, and I'm gonna uh, launch that on Monday too for Mental Health Month. So, mental health is one of my passions. I've been working in it for the last 8 years or so. And been doing it longer on a personal level before that. So I'm very excited about Mental Health Month. I'm excited to get the business going. I'm excited to talk to all these cool guests about mental health topics. And so I'm just like, this is an exciting time for me. And I wanted to share that with the rest of you. And then, of course, the 80s dance party tonight. And then, so tomorrow, I think I'm going to take one more day to kind of just do these an hour of streaming on various topics. And then after that, I think the format's going to change a little bit as I get guests and focus more on mental health topics. So the topic that I was going to do today came out. I did mentorship. I've been doing community building topics lately, and mentorship and friendship was part of that. And that led me to the concept of rites of passage, of the various kind of events or initiation rituals that we go through that integrate us into or sometimes out of different communities and subcultures. So I thought I'd talk about that, but first I forgot to make my puzzle yesterday, and the day before that I was making it but forgot to share the screen. And so I want to make sure, and by the way, I finished the puzzle, so today I get to start a whole new puzzle. It's going to be Woodstock Village. Let me choose the pieces. 855. That's too low. I might have to pick another puzzle. All right. Well, that looks okay for now. So I'm just gonna do the puzzle today and talk about rites of passage. And there's like formal rites of passage that society structures for us: graduations, weddings, birthdays, going away parties, that kind of stuff. But I was gonna like kind of, and I don't have a list. It's not gonna be exhaustive. I'm just gonna try to do it from memory and retrospectively go through my own life and kind of examine some of these rites of passage. Um, and they're not always formal or intended to be rites of passage, but it's experiences you go through that change you afterwards. There's a like before and after. You can mark your life by these events, or they introduce you, if not fully integrate you, into some new community or some new social set of social ties in your life. For example, growing up, I think I mentioned I started out in this town closer to the Texas side of Louisiana, and that's when I was my mom and dad's first child, and then my sister came a few years after that. And I don't have a lot of memories. Like that's where my earliest memories start, but I don't have enough of memories to go on from there to really say anything useful, at least about rites of passage. But after their marriage ended, or after they split up, and at least split up, let's say that, she moved us back to her hometown where my grandmother lived, and that was the little small Cajun village in south central Louisiana. And that was sort of a rite of passage just of its own. And suddenly, the environment I was living in with my mom and dad in this kind of suburban, it was like a suburban, it was like the suburbs of this larger city, had all changed. And now I was living out in the country, a whole new set of people. I started Head Start like that year, later in that year. So I got, that was my first kind of introduction to society and community outside of my immediate family. We were closer to our cousins and extended family. So all of that changed. That move that my mom made back to her hometown. I don't know the kind of person I would be today if that hadn't happened and they had stayed together and I had grown up in this town that was closer to Texas. I Because growing up in this one particular town, it was a very unique environment, a very unique setting. A lot of the traditions were culturally Cajun, and some of them go back to the Middle Ages, like our Mardi Gras. And so that's all I knew. That's the only world I knew from childhood that I grew up in to compare it to. So just that one move kind of bifurcated my life path into, like, collapsed it all into that particular waveform. And there were things like, she met my stepdad, and I got a stepsister and stepbrother out of that. So we would take family vacations together, and those were sort of rites of passage as we were trying to integrate all as one family unit. There was stuff like the Boy Scouts, and I was an altar boy. First communion integrated me into the Catholic Church, and I became a kind of an active part of that community, and I became an altar boy. And so there were those kind of community rituals. Confirmation was supposed to be one, but I had left the church by then. That was 7th grade. I was about 12 years old, and I didn't have any religious trauma or anything like that. That was strictly science class in the 6th grade. I started like really thinking harder about the universe and the origins of it, and the religious thing just suddenly stopped making sense. Kind of like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny had did a few years previously. So I just drifted out of the church on my own, but I don't have any negative memories or experiences of it. And then there's like cultural rites of passage from just my era, like seeing the Star Wars movie, or there's certain movies that we watched that were cultural milestones for my generation. So there's kind of rites of passage like that. And then a big one for me personally is when we made the move to that other town that was closer to the city I started life near. I'm in Louisiana. We have parishes, not counties, so it was in the parish of my birth where my father lived, and my stepdad had a job. That's where his job was. So he moved us close to there at some point. It was larger than the village, but smaller than the city. It was a couple of thousand people, and moving to that town, It happened around the same time as junior high school. Puberty, moving towns, changing cultures. It was much less of a Cajun town and much more of a kind of East Texas, Southwest Louisiana town. Very kind of cowboyish agriculture, rodeo. Like the cheerleaders dated the captain of the rodeo team instead of the football team, although they were some of them were basically the same people. Um, that was a big adjustment for me, like just making the transition from my childhood home where I was very well adjusted, Boy Scouts, altar boy, president of the 4-H club. Um, I was getting the gifted services I need, although I got them at the new school too, just in a different way. To being the outsider, the misfit. None of the kids liked me. I was not popular. In PE, I would go home with bruises on me. Every day we'd play dodgeball. Like the whole school would just all pelt me with the dodgeball all at once. I was like the prime target, and I would come home with just bruises from the dodgeball ball. They had to take me out of PE. And that was all new experiences for me. I had never experienced that sort of hostility before, and I didn't know why it was being directed at me, like why I was being singled out for it. I tried to make friends and get to know the other kids, but I was way too much of a nerd, way too much of an outsider, way too much of a homosexual, although I didn't realize at the time um, that was part of it. Although I figured out, it didn't take me long to figure out. Um, so I became less. It shifted me from being more extroverted and social and kind of in leadership roles that I'd taken at my previous school to an isolated, more introverted misfit that didn't talk to anybody, didn't bother trying to make friends. I had a book. My book was my like shield and armor and weapon in a way, or at least they saw it as one. I had my face in a book the whole time from junior high all through high school. And if anybody tried to talk to me, I was like Ali Sheedy in The Breakfast Club. I just stared at them. I would just glare at them. And I wouldn't say a word until they left me alone and I could go back to my book. And that got me through junior high and high school. But that was not a role I set out to be in, and it was not my natural role. And y'all all know I ended up at that gifted program that I talk about so much. And so that was kind of a rite of passage in and of itself. And they had several rites of passage within that as you transition from year to year. It was structured very similar to high school. You had freshman year, sophomore year, junior, senior. Senior year, you got to raise money, like fundraise for your senior trip. And we all went to, that's when in Houston, Texas, they had a Six Flags park called Astroworld before they tore it all down. So you got to go to Astroworld when you were a senior, and you got to all make a trip with your class that you had grown so close to. We went in a van, and our dorm counselors drove us in the van, and we all got to take the van to Houston and stay in a hotel and go to Astroworld together. And that was kind of special at that age. And that kind of bonded us too. And so that was kind of a milestone at the gifted program to make your senior trip. And then stuff like, so every year we had academic classes in the morning, and we would do science projects and read literature and philosophy and write papers. So it was academic focus in the morning. And in the afternoon, it was the fine arts. So we did, if you played a musical instrument, there were musical concerts and performances that you rehearsed for. There were art shows. We did a drama every year and a musical and a chorus performance. And I was in all three of those usually for most of the years. And so just doing those performances, just pulling off a theater production, just the musical was a big deal. That was kind of the final performance of the whole summer, and almost everybody was in the musicals and in the chorus too. And so the whole summer worked up to pulling off this musical and this choral performance and this play that we all worked so hard on and rehearsed on. And so that was kind of a rite of passage too. Um, and you were in, like the people that did, even within the school itself, the people that were part of the musical that could say that they did that musical that year, that kind of formed a little sub community and subgroup within the larger overall program. And it was a form of initiation into a community or a type of community. And then leaving that, going to the gifted college, we created our own rituals there. We started that fraternity, sorority, which we called a sorority. And we had different events um, related to that, kind of different rituals. I don't know if we did like full blown initiations into it, but we did have parties and events, and we had the Big Brother, Big Sister program where you, like, I had a little sister, even though we were all the same age, and I was her big brother, and you would exchange gifts throughout the week. It was surprise, it was secret, so she didn't know who I was. And then we'd had a party where we all revealed ourselves, and that kind of brought us closer as a fraternity, as a sorority. Um, then I left college at some point, and I guess you probably all know I was hospitalized junior year of high school, and so that was also kind of a rite of passage, surviving the crisis of adolescence. And I didn't have, it wasn't a complete nervous breakdown, but it was the, I was on the path toward one, like the prodrome to one. And so I stayed about six weeks in this. It was a private pay hospital, and that was an experience for me. I did not. How it started was I even knew, like even as a teenager in high school, I knew that I needed help. I knew things were not right. I knew that I was having a lot of difficulty adjusting to the new dynamics at home. And I kept asking my mom. My mom was constantly my whole life taking me to counselors. She'd take me to priest, and they had like the Catholic Monsignor did counseling. So he was like this old 90-year-old Skeletor guy. And none of these people knew how to help me. The only time I got any kind of real help is when I started seeing the Dr. Middleton, the gifted counselor. And to this day, like the only time I get real quality therapy is when it's from a gifted person that specializes in neurodivergence or autism and giftedness. Traditional or mainstream therapy, they just do not seem to know what to do with me. And so I was constantly in and out of these different counselors, but none of them really helped. And I, by the time I had reached junior high and this crisis was kind of accelerating, um, I even knew I needed help. So I would ask my mom, I'm like, I want to go see a counselor again, but I wanted to be a psychiatrist, because at that time psychiatrists were not just prescribers of medication. They actually did psychotherapy and worked intensively with you on the issues. So I thought having somebody that was an actual psychiatrist instead of just a counselor or even a psychologist would have this extra skill set that might be able to meet my needs at the time and help me get through whatever I was going through. And so I kept pushing for a psychiatrist, and I wanted it to be female because at the time, that's when I was starting to wrestle with my sexuality. And there were just things I wanted to discuss and be able to talk about that I didn't necessarily think I could do with a male. Although today I think I could have just fine. But back then, my little teenage brain was convinced that it needed to be a female. And so one day my mom came to me and she said, I found a female psychiatrist that we could go see if you want, but she's happens to be in another city that was about an hour away from this town we lived in. And she said, but we can drive there one day if you want and try her out. So I took her up on it. That sounded good to me. If she was willing to do that and put in that effort, I felt like I owed it to give it a shot. So she told me when the appointment was. It was one evening. It was like 5 or 6 in the evening, which I thought was weird. Like, who sees clients that late in the evening? But she said because we were coming in from out of town, and it had to be after my mom got off of work that that she would see us in the evening. So we were driving to this, and she worked out of this hospital, this kind of psych hospital. It was one of those private paid. Don't think of like a really industrial, modern, mainstream hospital. It was more of like a clinic, residential, clinical setting. Um, and so she worked out of this hospital clinic type place. And so we got there, and like there was hardly any staff there. It was after hours, and we rang the bell and they let us in. So I'm thinking we're here to see that psychiatrist. And they finally call my name and they take me down this hall, and there's these doors that you need a code to get in, and they lock behind you. And I had never experienced anything like that. And I remember they put me in this little room. It had a couch and a table and some chairs. It didn't look like a counseling room where you would see patients. It just looked like a random room with furniture in it. And so I waited in there for a while, and nobody came to see me. And I'm like, where's my mom? And I thought we were seeing this psychiatrist lady. What's going on? But I still didn't really think. Like, I didn't know to think anything suspicious because I had never heard of these places or had any experience of them. I didn't know it was a hospital. I didn't know what it was. So I just waited. And eventually she was kind of youngish. She had blonde hair, and she was dressed in ordinary clothes. She came in and she introduced herself and started talking to me. And it turns out she was a nurse, which didn't make sense to me because it was at a hospital. Why would a nurse be talking to me? But she was nice and pleasant and friendly, so I listened to what she had to say. And she had this like brochure that explained the program of the hospital. She was explaining the program to me, and I'm like, I thought they were giving me information in case I was interested maybe in the future of signing up for this program. And I'm like, okay, well, this is all interesting information. Thank you for sharing it with me. And then I think I told her, I said, well, thank you for telling me all this, and I'll think about it, and I'll let you know. And by the way, where's my mom? And she said, no, you don't understand. You're in the program right now. Your mom just signed you up. I'm like, that's when like the wheels started to click. And I'm like, what do you mean? She said, you're staying with us tonight. You're not going home, and you're going to be here for a while. And I'm getting emotional now, even reliving it. I lost it. Like, I just broke down in tears. I couldn't believe what she was telling me, that I was being hospitalized, and that I had to live there now, and I had to do this program that she just explained to me. And it was a combination of not so much anger as helplessness and frustration, and then a slight sense of betrayal that my mom had tricked me. Because I was tricked. Like, my mom knew the whole time she was coming to sign me into this hospital, but that's not how she was presenting it to me. And so I kind of got tricked. And that happens in these settings a lot. Like, there's ways to get people into them, not necessarily against their will, but also not necessarily with their full cooperation or knowledge either. And that's what was done to me. And I honestly don't know if I would have gone if she had presented up front, like, hey, there's this hospital I found that I want to sign you into. I probably would not have agreed. So she knew enough to trick me that was the method she would have to use. But at the time, my teenage mind didn't see it that way. And so I was just very emotional, and I didn't know what to feel. Like, I had never experienced this before. This truly was a rite of passage that I didn't know where it was taking me or what it was initiating me into. And But the catch was in all of this, I would get to see a female psychiatrist. There was one on staff, so I would have access to one. And so I think I settled down at some point because I realized that if it was serious enough that my mom felt she had to do all of that and sign me into this hospital instead of just making an outpatient appointment with a psychiatrist, that things were probably like pretty bad and that I probably did need to be here on some level. So I don't think it took me long to adjust. I didn't like the regimentation. I didn't like the rules. I didn't like not having the freedom to just do what I wanted to do throughout the day and read the books I wanted and watch the TV I wanted. You had to, there were like different levels, and you started at level one. And as you demonstrated responsibility and that they could trust you, you earned different levels, and different new privileges came with each level. So I worked up the levels pretty quickly because the staff were really good. They had a music therapist on staff, and I was really into music. I loved music. They had an art therapist, an occupational therapist, that we played all of these. They had this huge gymnasium. They had an earth ball, one of those giant balls that like almost, it's a gigantic gymnasium, right? And the ball itself is almost to the ceiling of this thing. It was huge. They had one of those giant parachutes that like 30 people have to form a circle and hold the ends of it to even get it to lift. And so we there were all kind of cool stuff like that. We played cool recreational games that I never played before. So there really was a lot to engage me and keep me stimulated. And I got a chance to really face some of my issues and start some positive progress on them. I was only there for like 6 weeks because the insurance decided that they weren't going to pay anymore. And so they discharged me. But I was at least at the point now where I was stabilized and I could pick it up from there on a more outpatient level. And that's when my adopted mother, the drama teacher from the gifted school, kind of took me in and let me finish out the school year. And then I ended up in the gifted college. So that was kind of my initiation into the mental health world. And thankfully, it turned out to be a more of a positive experience than it started out. Thanks to the skill of the staff and my willingness to do what I needed to do to get myself better. And so so after the college experience, and I decided not to go back to college and all of that, I was kind of on my own. That's when I finally went to a gay bar. I remember there was this dance club. Remember, we're in the smaller town, and it's about, I don't know, 20 miles away from the city where all the activity is. So everything you did was in the city. The mall was in the city, the movies, the restaurants. And so there was this dance club in the city that everyone liked to go to. And my sister had a friend that wanted to go to this dance club one night. And she talked me into going with her. And one of the things she used is she said that come with me to this club for a while, and then later in the night I will go to the gay bar with you because I know you've been wanting to go to the gay bar for the first time. And so I believed her and I trusted her, and I should not have. And so we got to the dance club, and I was not really into dance clubs. I don't like a lot of loud music, and I certainly didn't dance, especially at these big mega dance clubs where I definitely don't want to try to show off my dancing skills at. It was like it was called the Hangar. It was like this huge metal building out on the outskirts of town. And so she met some guy there, and she was all into her thing, and we'd been there for hours, and I'm like, I'm ready to go to the gay bar now. And she's like, oh, I'm having fun. I don't want to leave. Maybe you could find a ride to the gay bar. And I'm thinking, and go by myself? Like, that wasn't our deal. And there was a guy there from our school. He was one of the band nerds, and I didn't really know him that well, but this girl did. And so she talked to him, and he was leaving the club early. He wasn't going to stay all night, and he offered, if I wanted, to drop me off at the gay bar on his way home. He wasn't going to come with me, but he would drop me off. And I wanted to go to the gay bar so bad. I had built up like all day or even week. I don't know when we planned this, to go to my first gay bar. And so I didn't want to just go home. And so I agreed, and he dropped me off in the parking lot. The gay bar was called Crystals, and they had a sign painted on the wall. It was like in the down industrial part of downtown. And the sign said, "Enter in rear" or something. It was kind of a joke among the townspeople, and they had an arrow pointing to the entrance of the gay bar. And so he dropped me off in the parking lot. I was so nervous. I didn't know what to expect. I was by myself. I'd never been to a gay bar. I was just starting to come out gay. And he drove off, and I walked through that door, and that was my first gay bar. I was all by myself, and that was a rite of passage right there, let me tell you. And it wasn't. It was I think it was a weeknight, so it wasn't like a Friday or Saturday night when it was really busy. I think it was, or maybe it was a Saturday. But Saturdays at that bar were less. Friday nights were like the big nights, and Saturday was kind of hit or miss. So there wasn't a ton of people, but there were enough to give the bar experience. And I remember these two. That was when Madonna's Vogue had just come out, and it was popular. Everybody was voguing, and there was these two guys on the dance floor, and they were voguing. And I just said, I'm going to get the courage to go up and talk to them. They looked about my age, and I introduced myself. I said, I'm new. This is my first gay bar. And so they were nice. They talked to me, and we danced a little bit. I think I slow danced with one of them. That was my first time dancing with a guy, and that was nice. I love to slow dance. And I didn't have a ride home. Like, none of them. I lived in this city, like this little town 20 miles outside the city. Nobody was going to drive out there to take me home. And nobody from that town was going to come to the gay bar and pick me up either. So I was kind of stranded at this gay bar. I didn't know how I was getting home. And so like they were doing last call, and then the lights started to come on, and I still didn't have a ride home. I had no idea what I was going to do. And they asked me, they're like, "Well, where do you have a ride home? Where are you going? What are you going to do?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I didn't plan that far. I was with a friend. She was supposed to be my ride." And so they lived in this other little suburb town, kind of outside of this city, but closer to it. And so they kind of reluctantly offered I could ride home with them and stay the night at their apartment, and then maybe find a ride home in the morning. And so I didn't have any other options. I took them up on it. And it was kind of an after hours party. There was a few friends that all gathered at their house that night, and they were all talking about gay stuff and nothing I could relate to. I didn't know gay culture or gay lingo, and I think I fell asleep at their apartment, like on the floor or something, while they were talking and watching TV. I just didn't connect with that crowd. And the next day I woke up and I had to scramble for a ride home. I ended up calling my stepmom, who my dad lived closer to where I was than anybody from the town I was in. And I told her what happened and that I was stranded. And she very graciously agreed to come and pick me up and take me home. And I ended up going back to the gay bar many, many times after that. But I made sure to do it more responsibly. I had friends that I could get. I didn't drive at the time. I didn't start driving until I was like, that's another rite of passage, getting your driver's license. Till I was like 21 or 2 years old, maybe. They had driver's ed as part of high school that you could take, but because I didn't go my senior year and went straight to college, I didn't take it at high school. And so at some point, my mom signed me up. The state had a program where you could pay to take a course with the DMV and get your license that way. So my mom signed me up for that. I think it was a week. I went every day. We did a lot of classroom learning. And then you had to do so many hours of behind the wheel driving, where the driver in the driver's ed car with the little sign on top, and he had the extra brake he could hit in case you were fucking up too bad. And so when I did my test driving, I was driving all over this city, and I remember the freeway. Like when we hit the freeway, that was the scariest part. And after I did the test driving, I completed all my requirements. The teacher called my mom and she said, "Do not let your son get his driver's license. He is not ready to drive. He does not know how to drive." And I have dyspraxia, ADHD. I was uncoordinated. Like driving was very complex for my brain and body. And so I was so disappointed and crushed because my mom paid for this course. I did everything right. I did all the learning. I did very well on all the written tests. I just couldn't get the driving down. And so it was all for naught. And my mom kind of gave up at that point on getting me my license. My sister had hers. She was younger than me. All my friends had theirs, and I had to get rides to go everywhere because no license. And so at some point, I was probably 21. I had a friend, a drag queen friend that I knew from the bar that lived in our little town. And he had this giant, like big old black Cadillac. It was like a land yacht. And he offered to take me drive. He's like, "Oh, I'll teach you how to drive. It's not that hard. Well, let's just go out on the dirt roads, on the back roads one day." And he took me on the back roads, and we found these empty parking lots and this field and these roads that nobody used. And he had me behind the wheel of this giant, it was gigantic. It was like a Cruella de Vil car. He had a cigarette holder. He would have the big, long Virginia Slim 120 cigarettes. And he would smoke them out the window of this big black Cadillac and pretend to be Cruella de Vil. And through his tutoring and his patience with me, I picked up driving. Like that's all it took was somebody with the patience to just work with me a little bit. Now I can't drive a standard. I can only drive an automatic. To this day, I've not mastered a manual and the clutch and all that. And so through his teaching me and the practice he gave me, I think we went out a few times. I was finally able to master driving, and I drive very well. Now it's not that hard. I did get in one car wreck, and I had a few speeding tickets because in California, they had on the freeway, they had these signs that would say patrolled by aircraft. And I'd look up and I'm like, well, I don't see any aircraft, so they must not be in the air right now. And I would just keep going whatever speed limit I was going. And then the airplanes were up there and they had cameras and they would take a picture of your license plate and they would mail you tickets. I got so many tickets mailed to me in California. They wanted to cancel my insurance and because of these planes. And so stuff like that. But I've never been an irresponsible driver, never gotten in. I had one kind of wreck. But outside of that, the whole point is I'm a decent driver. I have good insurance record and a good driving record. And I know how to drive. I've managed to make that rite of passage and make that transition, even with my weird brain and body coordination thing. I pulled it off. And so getting the college degree was another one. I went back to college as an adult, and I minored in philosophy. I ended up getting a two-year associates in technology because I kept going through major after major after major. That's when the wokeness was starting to hit. And I went 4.5 years and I came out with a 2-year degree, but at least I came out with a degree and I was proud of that. So I had graduated college. I had a piece of paper. I finally made that rite of passage, even as minimal as it was enough for me. I do not do well with formal education. I need something very self-directed, multidisciplinary, that I could customize to my needs and my ambitions. And college just did not provide that at the time. I think they do have programs like that now at certain colleges, but not in Louisiana in the 90s where I was. So after that, I got my first real job. I bought my first car, had my first apartment, and I was like 27, I think. Those were all rites of passage. Moving to Austin, Texas with that friend, was a rite of passage. It put me in touch with a whole new community in Austin, Texas, the men's group, the late gay and lesbian center. Getting this job after college, moving to a new town, put me in touch with a whole new circle of friends. AOL was a huge like conduit into new people. And this was in 98. And my main hangout was the philosophy room in AOL. And there were all these intelligent people from all over the world that were just all day long talking about really intelligent, deep conversations. And I think this was still in 98. Toward the end of 98, one of the members in there had planned not a reunion, but a union in Philadelphia for whoever wanted for all of us to meet in person. And I said, I can't pass this up. I want to meet these people. AOL was so fascinating to me. It drove me to meet as many of the people I was talking to online in person as I could. And I'm still like that on Twitter. I want to meet as many Twitter people in person as I can, and Zoom people and all of that. And so I signed up for this reunion, and I bought a plane ticket to Philly. I had never flown on a plane before in my life. That was another rite of passage. And I remember, and I was living in San Francisco at the time I bought the ticket, but I was living in Vegas by the time it was time to take the flight. So I had a friend drive me to San Francisco so I could catch the plane out of there. And on the way back, there was a layover in Vegas, and I just stayed. I didn't make the last leg of the trip. I just stayed in Vegas. So I took the plane out of San Francisco. And I remember getting on I guess you're always kind of scared on your first plane flight. I didn't know what to expect or if it was going to crash. To go to this reunion in Philly. And I remember I was sitting next to I was in a window seat, and they had this old lady next to me, and we were on the runway. We hadn't taken off yet. And I was like telling her, she's trying to make conversation. I'm like, I'm going to Philly. This is my first flight. I'm so nervous. There's this AOL reunion. And at some point, she like realized that I was an autistic extrovert. And she's like, oh, well, that's nice, dear. That's nice. She kind of turned away, and like she wouldn't engage me after that. And I'm like, oh, Lord, we haven't even left the runway, and I've already lost my traveling partner, my seat partner. And so, but the flight was not bad. And the reunion was nice. I'd gotten to see Philly for the first time. It was another big city that I got to explore. And it was kind of adult. Here I was flying to Philadelphia to do this AOL reunion, and all by myself. And that was a rite of passage. You could say that the relationship in Vegas with the narcissist was a form of initiation. It initiated me into the experience of a bad relationship and narcissist and the kind of people they can be and the damage and destruction they can do. By the way, there's going to be one of my guests for Mental Health Month. Narcissism is going to be our topic. So we're going to get into all the ins and outs of what it's like dating a narcissist, being a narcissist, having a narcissist in your life, how to avoid narcissists, what to do if you find yourself with a narcissist. That's going to be one of our Mental Health Month topics, so stick around for that. So yeah, dating the narcissist was a horrible rite of passage and initiation, but it did give me the experience I needed to connect with Mike, who was his next victim after me, and we became a pair after that, partly through our shared experience with this narcissist. So that's kind of how these rites of passage can work, or these shared common experiences. And so being in the relationship with Mike, having that adult relationship, having a home together, having a job. Once again, I was adulting, but I was doing it with another person, another human being. And we were like combining our powers. And it was so different than the experience I had after college of just me having my own apartment and my own car and my own job, and that having that with another person like doubled the effect that it had. It doubled what we could accomplish together. We were just a fantastic team, and we were charting a course for our life that we were both satisfied with. It fulfilled us. Um, I was on a really good path there, and losing him, like watching him pass away in the ICU, that was my first time seeing death up close. Like I touched his arm while he was on a ventilator, and I remember his mom was in the room. We both were in the room together, and the nursing staff, they were calling in the priest for the last rites, and she's like, he knows you're here. Go ahead and touch him. He'll be able to feel you. And I remember touching his arm. I didn't expect this. I rarely take my mind back to that hospital room. And talking about it, I'm remembering details that. This is the PTSD, by the way. Depending on the source of the trauma and the type of trauma, sometimes the reaction can be anger or hostility, but sometimes it can be grief and sorrow. Anyway, that whole experience, that night in the hospital, and maybe I'll tell that story someday. That was a huge rite of passage into grief and loss and death. I've never had the same relation to death after. Like before that night, I wondered about death, and I stopped believing in an afterlife a long time ago, but you still don't know for sure. Like you don't have, it's all in your imagination. You still don't really know. You just imagine what it's like, or imagine that you know. But after that night, I knew. I had seen it for myself up close in the face. I looked into it, and we were so linked empathically. I felt it. I for a moment, possibly even for a few days, I wasn't sure I was the one who had died. Like I had experienced some part of that sensation of death just through my empathy with him, and so in a way, I had experience of death of my own, as close as I could possibly have, and still be not dead. I got as close as I could possibly come to the experience without having gone through it myself, just from witnessing it in the person I was closest to, and from the empathetic bond that we both had. And so after that, I didn't have another worry or thought about death again. I knew exactly what it was. I had seen it. I had felt it. I know what to expect when it happens. It didn't preoccupy me much after that at all. Then after that, I moved back to New Orleans, and our kind of spending time in the desert was kind of also a rite of passage of coming out of grief, and that initiated me into a sense of spirituality and healing that I had felt for the first time in my life. And it wasn't a mystical or supernatural sense of spirituality, but there was something that I could only describe as spiritual about being out in that desert. Death Valley was one of the desert, the Mojave Desert around Vegas. We spent some time in Sedona, Utah, Bryce Canyon, Zion National Park, all of those locations, just being out under the stars at night. There was a peace. I could heal and start to face the experience and the grief and process my thoughts with a clarity that I couldn't outside of that setting. So it was deeply psychological enough for me to feel comfortable using the word spiritual to describe it. I want to at least get this edge. I'm not really focusing on the puzzle because I'm talking, but I should have this edge done way sooner than it's taken me. I didn't want to leave. Like I really didn't. That I was making plans to do it on as permanent a basis as I could, and that's when the beach with Leonardo DiCaprio was one of my favorite movies, where he goes to Thailand and he kind of discover this little island paradise. And the Into the Wild movie had just come out, and all the hikers that group I was part of were talking about it, and I'm like, that sounds great. I want to do that. And I asked them, like, some of them they'd gone to see the movie and they came back, and everybody was asking how it was, and I asked them, I'm like, what happened to the guy? Because I want to do that. And they're like, well, he died. And that was like the record scratch. That's when like the brakes first started to be put on this wild idea I had of taking off into the desert permanently to live. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe I should. How did he die? He ate some potato berries or something. I'm like, yeah, I could totally see myself doing something like I don't have the knowledge and expertise to pull this off. I really need to rethink this harebrained scheme of mine. And I did. And that's when my friend from New Orleans invited me to stay with him and get back on my feet. And so I might have to leave it there. Coming up to Seattle, like meeting the guy in Seattle and coming up here, just like making a move on my own. I met him online. We talked on the phone for a little while. I booked a visit pretty quickly to meet in person because all the signs, like, he really was quite a unique person and very similar to me. And I don't find that just every day. And so I booked a visit and I came up here and visited, and we hit it off really well. There seemed like there was this really deep connection. And I went home. I let my work know. I put in my notice. I let my landlord know. And I shipped all of my stuff. I think it was UPS or something, FedEx or something. It was 12 giant boxes of stuff, my books, my clothes, my DVD, my collection, everything, and shipped it ahead of time so that when I was ready to make the move, I had no luggage or anything. I had a carry-on and a plane ticket, and I hopped on the plane with a carry-on bag. And I remember when that plane took off the runway, I remember thinking, I am flying into the unknown. I barely know this dude. All my worldly possessions are headed his way on the UPS truck. I'm on a plane. There's no turning back. I am truly jumping into something that I've never done before. And I guess for additional context, this was a BDSM relationship. We had met on a BDSM site. So it was not going to be the kind of relationship I had with Mike. Although it really wasn't, because although we met on the BDSM site, when we met in person, I kind of realized almost very early, if not instantly, that I didn't see him in that way, and he didn't really see me in that way. So we had decided we wanted more of a traditional relationship, and that we could incorporate the BDSM as we wanted, but that the relationship itself was not going to be a one based on a power differential, which a lot of BDSM relationships are. And maybe that'll be a topic one day. But so I didn't go into it thinking I'm headed into this BDSM relationship. What did I get myself into? I thought I'm headed into this relationship with this very strange but fascinating and unique person that has the potential to be something different than any relationship I've ever had in my life. And I'm putting a lot of trust in him. His exact words to me when I talked to him the night before and kind of finalized everything, and do you want to do this? And are we going through this? Is this actually going to happen? Am I just going to make this random crazy move across country for almost a stranger? His exact words to me were, trust me, put your life in my hands. And that set off every warning bell it could possibly set off. If a friend came to me and told me that story, I would say, you are so stupid. Do not do that. But I could not take the advice I would give to somebody else in the same situation. And this is how I rationalized it. I told myself, you know what? Maybe for once in your life, someone else does know more than you, and you're not always right. Even though I was pretty convinced this is a foolish move to make, I said, as an experiment, and this was a really costly experiment if I think about it, But as an experiment, what if you, for once in your life, trusted somebody else over yourself? Trusted that somebody else actually did know more than you about a situation or was wiser than you? Maybe you should just blindly trust this gifted autistic person, because traditionally, based on my positive experience with giftedness, I kind of was I grew up being able to trust gifted people, and usually in any situation I'm in, find the smart people, find the gifted people. Those are the people that I need to be with if I'm having trouble. So I already had a history of being able to trust gifted people. So I thought, because of the giftedness and because we shared so many neurodivergent traits, I didn't think that those would be a barrier, or I thought we'd be more understanding, or that we wouldn't betray each other because of traits that we both shared. It seemed like a safe bet to make. And so I remember thinking, something in me, like that my deep brain is setting off alarm bells, but maybe for once in my life, I should put my trust in somebody else and not always think that I'm right or I have the answer. Is that an edge piece? It doesn't look like an edge piece. Oh, yeah, it is. And so I did. I got on that plane, and I was on the plane flying to Seattle, thinking I just put my blind trust in almost a total stranger. I'm going off of nothing but that 1 week we spent together, and my intuition and my past history. And I wasn't really that worried about it. I mean, I wasn't stuck there. I mean, I always could move out and do my own thing, which is what I ended up doing. So it didn't seem like much of a risk, but I didn't foresee the psychological consequences that were about to hit me. And so that was a huge rite of passage into some trauma that I'm still recovering from to this day. And not only with that one person, but with a culture that I was totally not prepared for, could never have imagined existing. I didn't know what introverts were. I didn't know what passive aggression was. I didn't know what feminism and matriarchies were. And although I grew up in kind of a matriarchy, but not like the one up here, I didn't know any of that. And I was headed full, like dead into the center of that storm. And when I got to Seattle, I got here 2 days before my birthday. I got here on a Wednesday. My birthday was on that Friday. And I'd say by the time of my birthday dinner that evening, things were already starting to unravel. But when I landed and we got to his house that Wednesday, I felt a sense of relief, like I had done the right thing. And I'm like, good, I made the right move. I'm not worried anymore. It's all going to work out. And then 2 days later, by that Friday, I'm like, holy shit, what did I just get myself into? This guy and his mom are not where I need to be right now. They are way beyond my skill set to be able to accommodate myself to. And so I think I'll leave the story at there today. It's been an hour and I have another Zoom to go to. And I do want to finish this puzzle though. This edge puzzle. So remember the dance parties tonight in 2 hours, 7 p.m. Central. Come with your day glow, your neon, get your little glow in the dark sticks or glow bracelets or necklaces, whatever you have at home. Gear up, or just come. We have some people that just come to listen, just to hang out, hear the music. You can put your camera off. But if you're not doing anything tonight and you want to hang out with a pretty cool, fun group of people, we're going to be dancing and getting down 80s style tonight in 2 hours. So you can DM me for the link. As usual, primalhex, primalhex @gmail.com, or on Twitter. And I am ready to dance. I'm going to do this one last Zoom, and then that's where I'll be the rest of the evening. You can find me there. And then tomorrow, I think I'm going to stream around noon or 1. I'll put it on YouTube. I'll schedule it. And then tomorrow's my last day before Mental Health Month. And then so starting Monday, we're going to have guests and mental health topics all month long. So I hope you join me for that. And I'm really just trying to kill time before this puzzle is done. And then that's going to be my cue to leave. Go. Bye. Go dance. Um, and I'm sure there were many other rites of passage I could talk about. My around the same time I started going to the gay bar, I got introduced to psychedelics too, and that was another kind of rite of passage. So I'll talk about that sometime too. Anyway, have a good Saturday. I hope I see you at the dance party. If I don't, I hope you're doing something equally as fun, although that's going to be really hard to top. But you have to show up to find out. So I'll see you tomorrow. Happy Sunday. Bye.